Before we get started, I wanted to show you what this bag looked like on the inside and to show you how it's constructed so you'll better understand. So the back panel is actually a circle, and then when we do the front, we will be working in the row. So the back is worked in the continuous round and the front is worked in the row from side to side. I will be using Bernat Home Maker yarn. It is a size 5 bulky weight yarn, and if you can't find this, you can get some rewind tape from Lion Brand, which is also a size 5. You just want it to be stiff and sturdy, so try to find a size 5 bulky weight. You're also going to need a key ring. I'm using this size here, and I will link it in the description box below. I'm also going to be using a lanyard clip from this particular pack that I got at Walmart. You're going to need 4 stitch markers and a 14mm bead, as well as a 5mm hook. To begin, you are going to want to chain 2. You could also use the magic ring. In the second chain from your hook, make 6 single crochet. When you're working your single crochet, pull up just a little bit and make your stitches a little bit taller. You are going to want to stitch a little bit loosely in this round. Now you are going to be working in the continuous round, so you don't need to slip stitch to join. Normally you would work right here to make your stitches, but not for this particular project. We are going to do the waistcoat stitch, so I am showing you how to do that. It is a different hook placement. So we are going to go between those 2 vertical bars right there and through the back side to make the waistcoat stitch. So go ahead and put 2 single crochet stitches in the very first stitch using the waistcoat method. And then go ahead and grab your stitch marker because we're going to want to go in the continuous round. In every stitch around, we're going to put 2 single crochets, so we're going to use the waistcoat stitch. I'm showing you it's just slightly to the left of where you would normally go. And make your stitches taller as you go so that you don't have problem in the next round. So it's slightly to the left and down, and then in between those vertical bars, you're going to put 2 single crochet in every stitch around. So at the end of this round, of course, you should have 12 single crochet. Before I begin the next round, I'm going to pull on this tail to kind of close up that hole there that we began with, and then I'm going to weave that tail in. For the next round, you're going to take your stitch marker out and you're going to put 2 single crochet using the waistcoat stitch in the very first stitch. So put 2 in the first stitch and then mark your very first stitch of the round. In the very next stitch, we are going to just do 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, we're going to work 2. And in the next stitch, we're going to work 1. You should see the pattern. You're going to increase in every other stitch using the waistcoat stitch. So just repeat that all the way around. We're going to start the next round. Take your stitch marker out. You're going to begin with 2 single crochet in the first stitch using the waistcoat stitch and mark your very first stitch. In the next 2 stitches, we are just going to work 1 single crochet. We're going to put 2 in the next single crochet. and 1 in the next 2. So just repeat that all the way around. And we're going to start the next round, so take your stitch marker out and put 2 single crochet in the very first stitch. Mark your very first stitch of the round. In the next 3 stitches, we're just going to do 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, you're going to work 2. In the next 3 stitches, you're just going to work 1. So just continue this all the way around until you get to the stitch marker. We're going to do another round of increase. So in our very first stitch, you're going to put 2 stitches. Mark that very first stitch of the round. In the next 4 stitches, you are going to put just 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, you're going to put 2 single crochet. In the next 4 stitches, you're going to make 1 single crochet. Just repeat this stitch pattern all the way around and I'll meet you back. So here we are done increasing, and you're going to want to slightly stretch your piece out so that it lays a little more flat, and then I'm going to show you what it should measure before moving on. So once it's laying flat, you're just going to measure across the longest area, and it should measure about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now we are going to add our other stitch markers. So from where you are, count down 5 stitches and mark that stitch. You should have 6 stitches right there marked. Now we're going to go clear across to the other side, skip 1 increase and go to the next increase. And you're just going to mark that first stitch of that increase on the opposite side. And then you're going to mark the 5th stitch up from that point. So if you're looking at it, you should have 6 stitches on each side, and this is going to be the sides right here. And this is going to be the top, and this is going to be the bottom. So I'll show you what it looks like. So here's the finished product. If you're looking at the back side, these are the sides, and this is the top up here. And then down here is the bottom stitches. We are going to do 1 more round, but we are not going to increase in this last round. We are still going to be using the waistcoat stitch, and as you get to your stitch markers, I want you to take out the stitch marker and then put the stitch marker in the stitch that you make in its place. So we're going to move our stitch markers as we go, putting 1 stitch in every stitch around. So just continue doing that all the way back to your original stitch marker. So here we are, we're going to fasten off, and I'm going to show you how to do a seamless join. So you're just going to pull that strand through, you're not going to chain 1 like you normally would. Then you're going to skip over your marked stitch and go from the back. Go underneath where you normally would make your stitch and pull that strand through. Then you're going to take your stitch marker out, and going back to where you fastened off, go underneath the back loop and then draw that strand through there. And the reason I told you to skip a stitch is so you wouldn't accidentally increase, because it technically makes a stitch. So you're just going to put that stitch marker back in that stitch because you technically just went over the old one. And then you're just going to weave this tail in really good. So here's what it should look like once you're done. And we are just going to flip it so that the wrong side is facing us. And we are going to start our front detail. So you want where you fastened off to be to the bottom left with the wrong side facing you. So go ahead and join at the very next stitch to the far right bottom, just above where you marked that bottom stitch. And we are going to loosely slip stitch all the way around our piece. And the reason I say loosely is because we are going to be working back into those stitches. When you reach a marked stitch, take your stitch marker out and replace it in the slip stitch that you are making. So just continue making loose slip stitches all the way around your piece, moving your stitch markers as you go. And when you get pretty close to where we began, I'm going to show you what to do next. So here we are at the bottom stitch marker. You're going to put a slip stitch in that stitch and mark it with the stitch marker. And now you're going to slip stitch in the next stitch and in the next stitch. And now it seems redundant, but I promise it works. Slip stitch into the very first stitch that we started with. Now we are going to use my join as you go method. We are going to be working into these slip stitches as we go along. Skip over until you reach the very first stitch marker. You're going to pretend like those stitches there aren't even there. And you're going to go directly into the marked stitch and make a single crochet. Take your stitch marker out, and after you make your single crochet, put your stitch marker back into that stitch. Now you are going to make a single crochet in every slip stitch of the last round, all the way across the bottom until you reach the other stitch marker. So here we are at the opposite stitch marker. Go ahead and put a single crochet in that stitch, and then move your stitch marker to the stitch you just made. This is what your piece should look like. It should already be taking shape. You should have 14 single crochet across the bottom. Now, because we made this row, we need to join this row. And to do that, we're just going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And normally when you are working in the row, you would chain one and turn. But we are not going to be doing that in this project. You are just going to slip stitch one more time before you turn, and that is going to count as your chain one. Now you are going to pretend like those slip stitches right there that we just made are not even there. Just ignore them. We're going to skip right over them and start working into our marked stitches. So in that very first stitch, you are going to make a half double crochet. We are going to start our herringbone stitch pattern. Take that stitch marker out and mark the stitch you just made. Make one more half double crochet. Now we're going to start our stitch pattern. We are going to be working around the post of this last half double crochet that we made. We're going to be going around it. So the first thing we're going to do is go backward. And then we're going to pull up a loop to the same height. Then you're going to yarn over and go forward to the next open stitch and place your hook in that stitch. Yarn over and pull up one loop. You should have 4 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and draw through all 4 loops. And now we are going to be working around the post of this half double. We're going to move backwards, draw up a loop, yarn over, move forward to the next open stitch, insert your hook and draw up a loop, yarn over and go through all 4 loops on your hook. I'm going to show you one more time. This is the half double here that we're going to be working around. Moving backwards, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, move forward to the next open stitch, insert your hook and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through all 4 loops. You're just going to continue doing this, working backwards and forwards all the way across until you reach the marked stitch. So here I am at the end. I'm working around this last post, moving backwards and forward. After you make your last stitch, you need to mark that stitch. And before moving on, I recommend counting your stitches. You should have 14. Now we are going to join this row that we just made by making a slip stitch in the next stitch. And before we turn, we are not chaining one, we're just going to slip stitch one. Now we're going to turn, and we are going to skip over those 2 slip stitches like they don't even exist, and begin our half double herringbone stitch pattern in that marked stitch. So we start off by making 2 half doubles. Mark that very first half double crochet that you made. Make 1 more half double. And now working backwards and forwards around this last half double post, start your herringbone stitch pattern. So just do that all the way across till you reach your other stitch marker. So here I am at the end working over the last post of the row, making my last half double herringbone stitch. Take your stitch marker out and then put it in the stitch you just made. Now we're going to need to join this last row that we just made, so make a slip stitch. And then before we turn and work our next row, we're going to make 1 more slip stitch. Turn your work and begin with the marked stitches. Half double in the very first stitch. Mark the stitch you just made. Make another half double in the next stitch and begin your herringbone stitch pattern around that post there, working backwards and forwards. Just continue doing that all the way across till you reach the other stitch marker. So here I am at the last stitch. Make sure you move your marker as you make your last stitch. We're going to join this row by making a slip stitch. And then we're going to slip stitch 1 more time before we turn. Skip over those slip stitches you just made and start your half double herringbone stitch pattern. So just continue making this half double herringbone stitch pattern across until you reach the last stitch marker. So here I am at the end. I'm working on my very last stitch of this row. Go ahead and take your stitch marker out since we're done. And then instead of making a slip stitch, we're going to start on the top flap. So you're not going to slip stitch, you're just going to go directly into making our top flap. We're going to be working this way along those slip stitches. So go ahead and make a single crochet in the very first marked stitch right there. And then you're going to take the stitch marker out and put it in the stitch you just made. Continue on making a single crochet in every slip stitch across. Once you get to the stitch marker, you are also going to put a single crochet in that stitch. You should have 14 single crochet. Take that stitch marker out and put it in the stitch you just made. Now we are going to slip stitch into the marked stitch below. You can go ahead and take that stitch marker out. Moving back towards the top flap, we're going to skip over the very first marked stitch and slip stitch into the next stitch. Chain 1 and make a half double crochet in the very same stitch. Half double in the next, and begin your half double herringbone stitch pattern, moving backwards and forwards. And you're just going to continue making half double herringbones all the way across until you reach the last stitch, and you'll know when you get to it because it's marked. We are technically decreasing by 2 stitches on this row, so at the end of this row you should only have 12 half double herringbone stitches. So here I've reached the marked stitch. I'm going to ignore it. I'm not going to work into it. So like I said, you should have 12 stitches across this very last row that we just made. Now you will chain 1 and turn. We are going to slip stitch in the first 6 stitches. Chain 5. This will be our buttonhole, so if you have a bigger button, you may want to chain more. Slip stitch in the last 6 stitches. This is what your piece should look like. We are going to fasten off. Go ahead and weave in all the tails that you have loose. So now I'm going to show you how I make my front tassel. I just wrap my fingers 5 times to make tassel tails. And then just going through the buttonhole, take one end of all those tails and fold it in half to where the ends are even. Then we're going to use a gathering knot to secure. So to do that, cut a piece of yarn about 6 inches long and create a loop right underneath where that buttonhole ends. So create a loop like I'm showing you here, and we're going to wrap around several times to secure it. Once you're satisfied, take that tail through the loop you created and just hold it down while you pull up on that upper tail. Slide the knot underneath where you wrapped and then just cut it to the quick. Then you're going to cut your tassel ends to the length that you desire. You're going to add the button to the center front between rows 3 and 4. So I'm just going to sew it on to the front. So now we're going to add our keychain. I told you I'm using a lanyard clip because it's just easier. These things are super tight and it's not going to fall off. So just find a place on the edge there and put it in where you want it. And then I'm just going to clip it onto the keychain ring. Now I'm also going to show you how to make a wristlet strap. So I'm going to go ahead and take this swivel clasp off of this keychain ring. Now there's really no amount of stitches that you must make in order to have the right length. You just want to chain until it measures the length that you want for your wristlet. For me, that was about 13 inches or 42 stitches. Now normally I tell you to work in the backbone of your chain, but I'm not going to in this tutorial. I need you to turn and have your braid facing you. We're going to be working in the back loops of the chain stitches. So in the third stitch down, make a half double crochet, and in the next stitch, make a half double crochet. Now you are just going to begin your herringbone stitch pattern, moving backwards and forwards into the chain stitches. So just continue doing this, moving backwards and forwards in the herringbone stitch pattern until you reach the end of this row. Here I am at the end. It tends to curl up and I didn't like that. So what I'm going to do to fix it is to chain one and turn. In the very first stitch, you're going to make a slip stitch. And in every stitch, all the way until you get to the end. So just make slip stitches all the way down. This is going to help tremendously with that curling up. So here I've done slip stitch in every stitch across, and now I'm going to turn and go up the other side. So chain two, and just turn so that you're working in the base of the chain stitches that we started with, and simply continue making slip stitches all the way down. So you should notice that it is very sturdy and it wants to lay flat finally. It's stretchy but not too stretchy, so I am happy. I am going to chain one and bring your wrong sides together, and this is the wrong side here, so bring your wrong sides together. And going through both layers, slip stitch across. Now we are going to chain one and turn. Going through just one layer, single crochet 2 stitches across. Chain one and turn. Put 1 single crochet in each of those stitches. Chain one and turn, single crochet in both stitches. Now you can keep going if you want. This is going to be the part that goes through the loop of the swivel clasp. So I'm going to do one more. And I'm pretty happy with the length of this. It's probably about 1.5 inches. And I'm just going to fasten off. I'm leaving myself a long tail because I'm going to use that to sew this together. Grab your swivel clasp and attach it to the little strip of single crochet rows we just made. And then you are just going to whip stitch to those slip stitches that we made so that it is attached. I'm going to grab a smaller hook and just grab that long tail and whip stitch it through these slip stitches until you feel like it's pretty secure. Now I'm just going to tie these ends together. And it really doesn't matter how nice it looks because I'm going to cover that area up with a gathering knot. Now I'm going to cut a length of yarn that's probably about 10 inches long. And I'm going to make a gathering knot. So to do that, I'm just going to lay a loop of yarn over the area where I plan to wrap. And then I'm just going to hold that loop down while I wrap around the area that I'm trying to cover up. Once you're satisfied with how it looks, take that tail through that loop and hold it down and then pull up on the other end. And then just cut it to the quick. And this is what it should look like. And then you're just going to clip it onto your keychain. That's it. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.